In this video, Schopenhauer talks about the relationship between self-sufficiency and happiness, and why this requires solitude, withdrawal from society, especially for the person with great natural gifts. He talks about the difference between natural differences and social differences that are imposed upon us. He goes on at great length about the evils of society and the empty souls who inhabit it. He gives a very good metaphor in the middle of this section, comparing society to a symphony of horns and the exceptional individual to a soloist on the stage. He ends with some reflections upon the value of old age for self-sufficiency and solitude, and gives some advice to the young, to people who may feel the burden of society as he does, but don't yet have the consolation of old age to help them deal with it. So, here's what Schopenhauer writes about how self-sufficiency is key to happiness. According to him, to be self-sufficient, to be all in all to oneself, to want for nothing, to be able to say omnia mea porto, that is, I carry all my things with me, that is assuredly the chief qualification for happiness. Hence, Aristotle's remark hai eudaimonia to autarkeia esti, which means to be happy means to be self-sufficient. Happiness is not an easy thing. It is very difficult to find it within us, and impossible to find it elsewhere. Schopenhauer continues, for while a man cannot reckon with certainty upon anyone but himself, the burdens, disadvantages, dangers, and annoyances that arise from having to do with others are not only countless but unavoidable. There is no more mistaken path to happiness than worldliness or high life, for the whole object of it is to transform our miserable existence into a succession of joys, delights, and pleasures, a process that cannot fail to result in disappointment and delusion. This is on a par, in this respect, with its obbligato accompaniment, the interchange of lies. As our body is concealed by the clothes we wear, so our mind is veiled in lies. The veil is always there, and it is only through it that we can sometimes guess at what a man really thinks, just as from his clothes we arrive at the general shape of his body. Schopenhauer connects society with deception. It acts as a sort of covering or barrier that separates us from others and the truth. This is what luxurious living, festivities, the chase for pleasure, and social interactions entail. All of it entangles us in falsehoods, which it seems we can avoid by staying self-reliant, alone, and true to ourselves. Schopenhauer continues, all society necessarily involves, as the first condition of its existence, mutual accommodation and restraint on the part of its members. This means that the larger it is, the more insipid will be its tone. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free. Constraint is always present in society, like a companion of whom there is no riddance, and in proportion to the greatness of a man's individuality, it will be hard for him to bear the sacrifices that all intercourse with others demands. Solitude will be welcomed, endured, or avoided according to whether a man's personal value is large or small. The wretch feeling, when he is alone, the whole burden of his misery, the great intellect delighting in its greatness, and everyone, in short, being just what he is. Excellent paragraph here. Every individual is most true to himself, revealing his genuine nature, whether good or bad, when he is entirely alone, without getting lost in conversation, social interactions, and the falsehoods they often carry. So, it would seem logical that the miserable would be far more social, seeking companionship as an escape from their suffering, whereas the remarkable person would view socializing as a burden or a step down from a higher state of being, to borrow a term similar to those in Buddhism. Schopenhauer continues further. If a man stands high in nature's lists, it is natural and inevitable that he should feel solitary. It will be an advantage to him if his surroundings do not interfere with this feeling, for if he has to see a great deal of other people who are not of like character with himself, they will exercise a disturbing influence upon him, adverse to his peace of mind. They will rob him, in fact, of himself and give him nothing to compensate for the loss. But while nature sets very wide differences between man and man, in respect both to morality and intellect, society disregards and effaces them. Or rather, it sets up artificial differences in their stead, gradations of rank and position, which are often diametrically opposed to those nature establishes. The result of this arrangement is to elevate those whom nature has placed low, and to depress the few who stand high. These latter then usually withdraw from society, where, as soon as it is at all numerous, vulgarity reigns supreme. So-called good society recognizes every kind of claim but that of intellect, which is a contraband article, and people are expected to exhibit an unlimited amount of patience toward every form of folly, stupidity, perversity, and dullness. Meanwhile, personal merit has to beg pardon, as it were, for being present, or else conceal itself altogether. Intellectual superiority offends by its very existence, without any desire to do so. The worst thing about what is called good society is not only that it offers us the companionship of people who are unable to win either our praise or our affection, but that it does not allow us to be what we naturally are. It compels us, for the sake of harmony, to shrivel up or even alter our shape altogether. Intellectual conversation, whether grave or humorous, is only fit for intellectual society. It is downright abhorrent to ordinary people, to please whom it is absolutely necessary to be commonplace and dull. This demands an act of severe self-denial. We have to forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to become like other people. No doubt their company may be set down against our loss in this respect, but the more a man is worth, the more he will find that what he gains does not cover what he loses, and that the balance is on the debit side of the account. For the people with whom he deals are generally bankrupt. That is to say, there is nothing to be got from their society that can compensate either for its boredom, annoyance, and disagreeableness, or for the self-denial it renders necessary. Accordingly, most society is so constituted as to offer a good profit to anyone who will exchange it for solitude. That's an excellent paragraph, another impressive one. I really like the line, "People who can't earn either our admiration or our affection." It's a clever expression, and the idea of engaging in an exchange at a loss, giving up 3/4 of ourselves to participate in society or gaining the company of others, but at the cost of something far more valuable, our own inner peace. In this way, we become the loser in every social interaction. The more we engage, the more we sacrifice. Back to Schopenhauer, intellectual superiority, which is seldom to be met with and intolerable when it is found. Society has capriciously adopted a false kind of superiority, conventional in its character and resting upon arbitrary principles. A tradition, as it were, handed down in higher circles and, like a password, subject to alteration. I refer to bon ton or fashion. Whenever this kind of superiority comes into collision with the real kind, its weakness is manifest. Moreover, the presence of good tone means the absence of good sense. No man can be in perfect accord with anyone but himself, not even with a friend or the partner of his life. Differences of individuality and temperament are always bringing in some degree of discord, though it may be a very slight one. That genuine, profound peace of mind, that perfect tranquility of soul, which, next to health, is the highest blessing the earth can give, is to be attained only in solitude and, as a permanent mood, only in complete retirement. And then, if there is anything great and rich in a man's own self, his way of life is the happiest that may be found in this wretched world. Let me speak plainly. However close the bond of friendship, love, or marriage, a man ultimately looks to himself and his own welfare alone, and at most to his child's too. The less necessity there is for you to come into contact with mankind in general, whether in business or personal intimacy, the better off you are. Loneliness and solitude have their evils, it is true, but if you cannot feel them all at once, you can at least see where they lie. On the other hand, society is insidious in this respect. Offering what appears to be the pastime of pleasing social intercourse, it works great and often irreparable mischief. The young should be trained early to bear being left alone, for it is a source of happiness and peace of mind. The comparison here holds significance. Both loneliness and solitude have their drawbacks. They are harmful, but you can clearly identify where and how they cause harm, allowing you to prepare for them. The challenge of being in society, according to Schopenhauer, is that it is deceptive. It misleads, subtly creeps in, and offers you one thing while quietly taking away something far more valuable. From this, it can be concluded that a man is in the best position when he relies solely on his own resources and is completely self-sufficient. The more a man has in himself, the less others can be to him. That feeling of self-sufficiency is what restrains those whose personal value is in itself great riches from such considerable sacrifices as are demanded by intercourse with the world, let alone from actually practicing self-denial by going out of their way to seek it. Ordinary people are sociable and complacent precisely because of the opposite feeling. To bear others' company is easier for them than to bear their own. Moreover, respect is not paid in this world to that which has real merit. It is reserved for that which has none. So retirement is at once a proof and a result of being distinguished by the possession of meritorious qualities. It will therefore show real wisdom on the part of anyone who is worth anything in himself to limit his requirements as may be necessary in order to preserve or extend his freedom. And, since a man must come into some relations with his fellow men, he should admit them to his intimacy as little as possible. I have said that people are rendered sociable by their inability to endure solitude, that is, to endure their own company. They become sick of themselves. It is this vacuity of soul that drives them to intercourse with others, to travels in foreign countries. Their mind is wanting in elasticity. It has no movement of its own, so they try to give it some by drink, for instance. How much drunkenness is due to this cause alone? They are always looking for some form of excitement, the strongest kind they can bear. They can bear the excitement of being with people of like nature with themselves, and if they fail in this, their mind sinks by its own weight, and they fall into a grievous lethargy. It is a well-known fact that we can more easily bear up under evils that fall upon many people besides ourselves. Boredom seems to be an evil of this kind, so people band together to offer it common resistance. The love of life, at bottom, is only the fear of death, and in the same way, the social impulse does not rest directly upon the love of society, but upon the fear of solitude. It is not alone the charm of being in others' company that we seek. It is the dreary oppression of being alone, the monotony of our own consciousness that we would avoid. People will do anything to escape it, even tolerate bad companions and put up with the feeling of constraint that all society involves, a very burdensome one at that. But if aversion to such society conquers the aversion to being alone, they become accustomed to solitude and hardened to its immediate effects. They no longer find solitude to be such a bad thing and settle down comfortably to it without any hankering after society. This is partly because it is only indirectly that they need others' company, and partly because they have become accustomed to the benefits of being alone. Boredom is one of those evils that falls on many people, so they band together to banish it. But the true way out is to become hardened to the burdens of solitude, so you can bear up under it easily and avoid tranquilizing yourself with the hazards of society. Schopenhauer continues, such people, it may be said, possess only a small fraction of humanity in themselves, and it requires a great many of them put together to make up a fair amount of it. To attain any degree of consciousness as men, a man in the full sense of the word, a man par excellence, does not represent a fraction, but a whole number. He is complete in himself. Ordinary society is in this respect very like the kind of music obtained from an orchestra composed solely of Russian horns. Each horn has only one note, and the music is produced by each note coming in just at the right moment. In the monotonous sound of a single horn, you have a precise illustration of the effect of most people's minds. How often there seems to be only one thought there, with no room for any other. It is easy to see why people are so bored, and also why they are so sociable, why they like to go about in crowds, and why mankind is so gregarious. It is the monotony of his own nature that makes a man find solitude intolerable. Omnis stultitia laborat fastidio sui. All folly suffers from self-loathing. Folly is truly its own burden. Put a great many men together, and you will get some result, some music from your horns. A man of intellect, however, is like an artist who gives a concert without any help from anyone else, playing on a single instrument. A piano, say, which is a little orchestra in itself. Such a man is a little world in himself, and the effect produced by various instruments together, he produces single-handed in the unity of his own consciousness. Like the piano, he has no place in a symphony. He is a soloist and performs by himself, in solitude, or, if in the company of other instruments, only as a principal or for setting the tone, as in singing. However, those who are fond of society may, from time to time, profit by this simile and lay it down as a general rule that deficiency of quality in those we meet may be, to some extent, compensated by an increase in quantity. One man's company may be quite enough if he is clever, but where you have only ordinary people to deal with, it is advisable to have a great many of them so that some advantage may accrue by letting them all work together, on the analogy of the horns, and may heaven grant you patience for your task. The man of genius, Schopenhauer says, the man of exceptional quality, is like a soloist playing the piano, producing the effect of an entire orchestra from the unity of his own consciousness. A great simile and image. He suggests that if you have to deal with ordinary people, you should deal with a lot of them so that you aren't overwhelmed by any one of them. Schopenhauer continues, that mental vacuity and barrenness of soul to which I have alluded is responsible for another misfortune. When men of the better class form a society for promoting some noble or ideal aim, the result almost always is that the innumerable mob of humanity comes crowding in too, as it always does everywhere, like vermin. Their object is to try and get rid of boredom or some other defect of their nature. Anything that will affect that, they seize upon at once, without the slightest discrimination. Some of them will slip into that society or push themselves in, and soon enough either destroy it altogether or alter it so much that in the end it comes to have a purpose the exact opposite of what it had at first. This complaint is about the inability of certain elite institutions and societies to remain elite. Everybody comes pushing in, wanting to relieve their own boredom or the intolerable burden of their minds by getting a piece of the action. The suggestion here is that people of quality simply cannot keep these people out. They're like vermin crowding in. Schopenhauer continues, this is not the only point of view from which the social impulse may be regarded. On cold days, people manage to get some warmth by crowding together, and you can warm your mind in the same way by bringing it into contact with others. But a man who has a great deal of intellectual warmth in himself will stand no need of such resources. Here is Schopenhauer's well-known parable of the porcupines. The porcupines are prickly and cold, so when they try to come together, they prick each other. They move apart and get cold again. Eventually, they find they have to stand just close enough together to warm each other with their body heat, but not so close that they stab each other with their quills. Schopenhauer uses this to explain society among human beings. We are flinty and prickly, but we do need each other to some degree. Back to Schopenhauer. As a general rule, it may be said that a man's sociability stands very nearly in inverse ratio to his intellectual value. To say that someone is very unsociable is almost tantamount to saying that he is a man of great capacity. Solitude is doubly advantageous to such a man. Firstly, it allows him to be with himself, and secondly, it prevents him from being with others, an advantage of great moment. For how much constraint, annoyance, and even danger there is in all intercourse with the world. All our troubles come from not being able to be alone. It is indeed a risky, even fatal thing to be too sociable, because it means contact with natures, the great majority of which are bad morally and dull or perverse intellectually. The cynics renounced all private property in order to attain the bliss of having nothing to trouble them. To renounce society with the same object is the wisest thing a man can do. Bernardin de Saint-Pierre has the very excellent and pertinent remark that to be sparing in regard to food is a means of health, in regard to society a means of tranquility. The diet of food restores the health of the body, and that of men restores the tranquility of the soul. To be soon on friendly or even affectionate terms with solitude is like winning a gold mine, but this is not something that everybody can do. The prime reason for social intercourse is mutual need, and as soon as that is satisfied, boredom drives people together once more. If it were not for these two reasons, a man would probably elect to remain alone, if only because solitude is the sole condition of life that gives full play to that feeling of exclusive importance which every man has in his own eyes, as if he were the only person in the world. This feeling soon shrivels up in the throng and press of real life, getting at every step a painful diminishment. From this point of view, it may be said that solitude is the original and natural state of man, where, like another Adam, he is as happy as his nature will allow. Schopenhauer elaborates. It is an interesting suggestion that solitary Adam, prior to the creation of Eve, represents the ideal perfection of the human race. But still, Adam had no father or mother. There is another sense in which solitude is not the natural state, for at his entrance into the world, a man finds himself with parents, brothers, and sisters, that is to say, in society and not alone. Accordingly, it cannot be said that the love of solitude is an original characteristic of human nature. It is rather the result of experience and reflection, which, in turn, depend upon the development of intellectual power and increase with the years. Speaking generally, sociability stands in inverse ratio to age. A little child cries out in fear if left alone for only a few minutes. Later, to be shut up alone is a great punishment. Young people soon get on friendly terms with one another, and it is only the few among them with nobility of mind who are glad to be alone now and then. But to spend the whole day thus would be disagreeable. A grown man can easily do it, and as he advances in years, it becomes less and less trouble. An old man who has outlived his friends and is either indifferent or dead to the pleasures of life finds himself in his proper element in solitude. In individual cases, the special tendency toward retirement and seclusion will always be in direct proportion to intellectual capacity. For this tendency is not, as I have said, a purely natural one. It does not come into existence as a direct need of human nature. It is rather the effect of the experience we go through, the product of reflection upon what our needs really are, especially from the insight we gain into the wretched stuff of which most people are made, whether morally or intellectually. The worst part is that in individual instances, moral and intellectual shortcomings are closely connected and reinforce one another, producing all manner of disagreeable results, which make most social interactions not only unpleasant but intolerable. Hence, although the world contains many things that are thoroughly bad, the worst thing in it is society. Schopenhauer continues, listing writers and thinkers who champion solitude, such as Sadi, Angelus Silesius, and Giordano Bruno. They all suggest that those with noble minds inevitably gravitate towards seclusion, seeing society as vulgar and suffocating to their intellectual and moral lives. This propensity for seclusion stems from an aristocratic feeling. Rascals, he notes, are always sociable. The chief sign that a man has nobility in his character is the little pleasure he takes in the company of others. As he advances in years, he finds that solitude becomes a habit, a second nature. This love of solitude, he explains, grows naturally over time, as youth gives way to maturity and the illusions of life fall away. With experience, a man learns that people do not generally improve upon closer acquaintance. The world presents few exceptions to this rule, and with those exceptions, the wise man interacts sparingly. As we grow older, isolation and our own company become habitual, even desirable. The love of solitude, once a struggle to cultivate in youth, gradually becomes second nature. Those who have been friendly with solitude from youth up find themselves deeply comfortable in its embrace. In old age, the passions diminish and the demands of society become less pressing. This transition allows a person to focus entirely on intellectual pursuits. 1,000 things that were once obscure or ambiguous become clear. The wisdom gained from experience makes it easier to solve problems and understand subjects that once seemed difficult. The obstacles that challenged a young mind seem less insurmountable, offering satisfaction and clarity as one advances in age. From long experience of human behavior, one ceases to expect much from others. It becomes apparent that people in general do not gain by closer acquaintance. Aside from rare exceptions, most people prove to be disappointing, both morally and intellectually. This discovery makes solitude more appealing. The illusion that others will bring fulfillment fades with time, leaving behind the understanding that true peace comes from within. By the time a man reaches old age, isolation no longer feels like a burden. It becomes the ideal state for contemplation, reflection, and intellectual growth. Yet, Schopenhauer admits that solitude does have its small drawbacks. Just as remaining indoors for long periods can make a person physically sensitive to changes in the weather, prolonged solitude can make a person overly sensitive to minor irritations. The smallest disturbances, words, gestures, or glances, can become vexing, particularly when interacting with society after long isolation. But despite this drawback, the wise person learns how to navigate interactions with others by maintaining an internal sense of detachment. When compelled to engage with society, one can do so without becoming fully entangled. Schopenhauer offers this advice to the young. If you cannot entirely escape society, learn to carry a part of your solitude with you into social settings. This does not mean withdrawing entirely, but rather developing an ability to remain inwardly self-sufficient, even when surrounded by others. Don't be quick to share every thought or place too much weight on the opinions of others. Expect little from them, either morally or intellectually. This indifference towards society's judgments will help cultivate tolerance and prevent you from being disturbed by external noise. Schopenhauer likens this approach to a fire. The wise man keeps a proper distance from its heat. The fool either comes too close and gets burned or shivers in solitude, complaining about the cold. To maintain balance, one must neither fully embrace society nor reject it entirely. Instead, navigate its terrain wisely, always safeguarding inner peace. He ends this section with reflections on the immense joy and privilege of intellectual self-sufficiency. Those who possess a rich inner life do not require society to provide them with meaning or stimulation. The man of intellect, like a solo musician, plays the symphony of life from within himself, producing harmony without the need for external validation or accompaniment. According to him, solitude is not just a condition of life, it becomes life's ultimate teacher, especially for those who possess wisdom or intellectual depth. As age increases, so too does one's appreciation for being alone. This solitude isn't a sign of defeat or withdrawal from life, but rather a reward. It provides the space for intellectual refinement, self-reflection, and the appreciation of life's subtler pleasures. As a young person, one may look to others for meaning, fulfillment, and guidance, but life's lessons reveal that most of what society offers is superficial. Old age brings clarity, the understanding that peace of mind, rather than the approval or companionship of others, is the highest form of happiness. By this stage, one no longer seeks affirmation from the world. The world, with its petty concerns, becomes something to observe from a distance. The wise man, like a mountain climber who has reached a peak, looks down at the world not with scorn, but with understanding. He sees the errors, the fleeting pursuits, and the wasted energies of those still caught up in the thrill of social living. For Schopenhauer, solitude liberates one from the false promises of society. Social life often disguises itself as a cure for loneliness, but it frequently brings more harm than good. Expectations, misunderstandings, betrayals, and disappointments are the natural outcomes of constant human interaction. To the person of wisdom, solitude is not an escape. It is a means to preserve the soul's integrity. He acknowledges that the young, who are still tied to passions and ambition, may view solitude as a punishment. But as wisdom grows, solitude shifts from being something to endure into something to cherish. Schopenhauer doesn't entirely advocate for permanent isolation. Rather, he suggests a balanced approach, selective engagement. One should only engage with people who add genuine value or joy to life. This means avoiding the company of those who drain energy, who offer neither intellectual stimulation nor emotional nourishment. The wise man surrounds himself only with those who do not force him to sacrifice his authenticity. He describes most social interaction as a form of dressing down, where the exceptional individual must conceal his true nature for the sake of harmony. This shrinking of the self creates tension and inner conflict, leading to the feeling of being out of place in social settings. Therefore, he argues that solitude is preferable because it allows the individual to be fully and unapologetically themselves. In solitude, the mind is free to explore the depths of knowledge, art, and philosophy without interruption. Schopenhauer emphasizes that the highest form of happiness is found when one is fully absorbed in intellectual pursuits, whether it be contemplating ideas, studying nature, or creating works of art. This internal richness ensures that life never becomes dull or empty, even without external stimulation. In solitude, one is no longer bound by the need for approval or trapped by the fear of judgment. Freed from these external chains, the individual is able to explore life's most profound truths, reaching a state of inner tranquility that society could never offer. Schopenhauer closes with the idea that peace of mind is life's most precious gift, second only to health. Solitude, when embraced properly, leads directly to this state of inner peace. Free from the constraints of pleasing others, the wise man lives on his own terms, surrounded by the thoughts and pursuits that truly fulfill him. Subscribe, like, and share for more videos. Stay connected for deep insights into ideas on will, pessimism, and the nature of reality. Don't miss out on more thought-provoking content. Thank you.